1.
And welcome to the grand final edition of the weekly footy roundup. And we've got we got the predicted grand final teams to look at, and also we're going to be taking a look back at a few of the top 10 of past grand finals. And to start things off with, let's review the preliminary final. In the first of the preliminary finals, it was Geelong and Hawthorn on Friday night. The Cats booked their spot in the big dance, winning by 30 points. On Saturday, the Brisbane Lions will be the second team to versus Geelong in the grand final after they won by 29 points against Collingwood. Now we go to the... Alright. Now we're taking a look back at let's look at the 10 best grand finals of the last 50 years. Well, I think honourable mention is we're going to have to go back to 1979. Carlton and Collingwood in the grand final. It was at that time, around that time, it was very wet at the NCG. Well, it was much better than what the SANFL grand final produced that year. It was the worst weather in Adelaide history. They even had to put the floodlights on at 2 p.m. because of how bad it was. With this grand final game between Carlton and Collingwood, well, Wayne Harms won the first Norm Smith medal ever. We all remembered he was the one that set Kent Sheldon up for that winning goal in a muddy quagmire at the MCG. That's for and that was the year Peter Moore Darcy Moore's dad won the Brownlow medal. At number 10, we got the 2011 grand final between Geelong and Collingwood. Collingwood went into the game as favourites. Geelong went in as underdogs, even though Geelong beat them twice that season. At half-time, Collingwood were just about hit the front. And then James Ponsiadley done his shoulder. However, Tom Hawkins had his breakout game, and it turned into a blowout in the last quarter with Geelong winning by 38 points. But the biggest debacle that happened that grand final was Meatloaf's performance. It was going to be one of the worst grand final performances of all time. It would have been number 1 if it wasn't for Meatloaf. At number 8, we got the 1984. Number 9, we got the 1984 grand final, Hawthorn and Essendon. That's a good one to remember for you Bombers fans. Lou Richards screamed in the commentary box saying this premiership is Sheedy's premiership, as it was football as they'd never seen before. Hawthorn looked like they were going to belt them in the first quarter. Just looked like similar to the 83 grand final that happened 1 year prior. But on this occasion, however, the Bombers came back. They came from 6 goals down to win by five goals. After Leon Baker kicked the first goal in the last quarter, it was all Essendon. Terry Wallace said years later he was awakening of the sleeping giant of Essendon. That was why he got his Bulldogs to play flooding footy in 2000. That give Essendon their only loss of the season. Number 8, we got the 1977 draw grand final. Collingwood and North Melbourne. Final score was Collingwood 11-10-76, North Melbourne 9-22-76. I remember that Ron Barassi wasn't very happy after the game, after his Rouge drew. He said to the players' wives around that time, "I need you 7 days later." But North won the premiership 7 days later. And that was the And that was the one when Phil Manasseh kicked that running goal. 108,000 came for the drawn grand final. 92,000 came for the replay. At number 6, we got Geelong and St Kilda from 2009. Well, with 5 minutes to go, it looked like the Saints were finally going to win the premiership. But Paul Chapman happened. Paul Chapman kicked the winning goal, kicked the sealer and the winning goal, and won the Norm Smith medal for his best in front of a rain-soaked MCG, in front of like about 90,000. I'm sorry I'm going to have to bring the 2009 grand final up again, Cardman. Although you're a Saints fan. At number 6, we got the 2010 draw grand final. Lenny Hayes won the Norm Smith medal that game. As Colin. Stevie Milne had the chance to win the game for the Saints in the drawn grand final. But the ball bounced the wrong way. He kicked the point. The final score was 68 points apiece. And that was when Heath Shaw came up like a librarian the next week. And Collingwood won by 56 in the replay. And yet they both wore the same jerseys from the previous week. But the only change that happened for Collingwood was Collingwood didn't make a change in the replay. Leon Davis was out. Brett McCaffrey was in. Saints made a change themselves. Michael Gardner was suspended and Ben McAvoy got a recall. At number 5, we got the 2023 grand final. Collingwood and Brisbane at the MCG. That one was a close one. What a performance that was from Bobby Hill. 5 goals in the grand final. Shame we might not be seeing him in a Collingwood jersey again next year, as his partner wants to go back to Perth. As I reckon the West Coast Eagles might have a chance to get it next year. Jack Crisp kicked 2, Jordan De Goey 2, Nick Dacos, Myercheck, Pendlebury and Sidebottom all kicked goals. But the tragic part of that grand final is what happened to Nathan Murphy. He was he was Collingwood's best defender. Very underrated he was, but he had that career-ending concussion, which caused his career to come to an end. He sadly hung up the boots after the game. And he's now one of the assistant coaches at Collingwood. Now, and that was also Jack Jennings' last game for Collingwood. He left down to go to Hawthorn a few weeks later. But Taylor Adams felt heartbroken about missing the grand final for Collingwood. He seemed like a nice bloke. But he went to Sydney after that. And he also got dumped from the Swans grand final side last year against Brisbane. And sadly, he might be set to hang up the boots, Taylor Adams. Anyways, number 4, we got the 2006 grand final. Swans lose to West Coast by a point. If West Coast had won that qualifying final the previous week, it would have been them and the Crows in the grand final. The Crows would have probably had a chance against Sydney in that prelim. It was in that 18-month period, the two teams met up 6 times. Adam Good showed a bit of good sportsmanship after that game, after Chris Judd said to him, after he said to Chris Judd, "Are you okay?" when Chris Judd done his shoulder. But Judd later said to him, "We were human beings first of all." And although Chris Judd captained West Coast to the premiership, but he actually allowed his teammate former skipper Ben Cousins to hold it up. And at number 4, we got another West Coast premiership. 2018. They beat Collingwood by 5 points. The Eagles were down by 29 in the first quarter. They had no Andrew Gaff, no Nick Natanui, and no Brad Shepherd. They were all, Gaff, Natanui, and Shepherd were injured, while Gaff was suspended for his hit on Andrew Brayshaw. Was out for 8 weeks. Although Collingwood got off to a great start, but Jeremy McGovern set up the win for West Coast. He passed the ball off to Liam Wright. He passed the ball off to one of their midfielders. Might have been. Just looking it up how he set up the play. And that set Dob Sheed up for the winner. And Dob Sheed was the one who kicked it. West Coast won the match. At another honourable mention was the 2005 grand. Number 2, well, I got the 2005 grand final, Sydney and West Coast. That was another thriller. The Swans broke the drought after 72 years. We all remembered Stephen Quartermain's quote saying, Dean Cox, can he win the game for the Eagles? Leon Barry, you star! For the first time in 72 years, the Swans are premiers of the AFL. Well, what was a classic quote, that one. At number 1, well, we're going to have to go to the great 1989 grand final, Hawthorn and Geelong. What a game that was. Hawthorn, Gary Ablett kicked 9 on the losing side. Won the Norm Smith medal from the losing side. As Hawthorn won the game by 6 points. This was the game when Mark Yates ran into Dermot Brereton. And even Dipper got injured in the first quarter. But Hawthorn still got to win the game. I kind of felt Johnny Platten got robbed of his Norm Smith medal that day, although he played pretty good in the midfield for Hawthorn. Meanwhile, for the Croc, and now we're about to take a look at the amount of premierships looking at the premierships that each team won. List of premiers. As Collingwood, Carlton and Essendon won 16 each. 13 from the Tigers, along with Hawthorn and Melbourne. Geelong won 10. Fitzroy with 8. Fitzroy won 8 premierships, although they're no longer in the competition after 1996, sadly. South have won 5. South Melbourne/Sydney won 5. North Melbourne with 4. West Coast have won 4. So with the Brisbane Lions. 2 premierships to the Bulldogs. 2 to Adelaide. Saints with 1 and Port won 1 in 04. The premiership Saints one was 1966. Now we take a look at the predicted teams. I reckon Reece Stanley might come in for the grand final. Tom Stewart is unfortunately out. That would move Sander Koenig back to the back line. Jared Berry done his shoulder in the prelim. I reckon James Tunstall might come into the side. If not, I'm probably thinking maybe Sam Day to stay in the side. Now we go to the score prediction for this year's grand final. I reckon Geelong will get up by 38 points, just like the qualifying final. The one who I reckon will get the norm, I'm probably thinking Bailey Norm Smith, as his new nickname might be Norm. And that's the end of the episode. As after this, we'll be, for the off season, we'll be looking at the trade period and we'll be looking at some past AFL seasons, the days gone by.